Goeienaand. Good evening, fellow South Africans, from a nice and warm Brisbane morning here in Australia. And there are a couple of things I'd like to start off with. And the other day we were talking about whether you should look at getting gold or silver when moving money out of South Africa. And I wanted to give you a comparison, and I raided my little safe and got a couple of bars out so you can have a look. Now, that's a 10-ounce gold bar, and it's worth about 200,000 rand. Okay, you can see it's very small. Silver, not so good. There's a 100-ounce bar of silver, again from the Perth Mint. It's heavy, and that's only worth about 25,000 rand. So in comparison to the gold bar, this is a 10-ounce gold bar, you can see that it's much more portable. So gold is definitely the way to go. Now, another update which I want to run by you is what's happening in Russia. Very interesting, the developments there with white farmers going to Russia. And I came across this clip, which I'll play for you now. Let me just get into it.
Boer, descendants of Dutch-speaking settlers of the Eastern Cape frontier in South Africa during the 18th and much of the 19th century.
The Boer people who moved inland in the 19th century, they tried to act in a way that was fair. They tried to negotiate officially. They tried to avoid conflict. The land in this area, for example, was never taken by whites from blacks with violence or in an unjust manner.
The expropriation of land occupied by white settlers after the 16th century without compensation is envisaged as one of the measures that we will use to accelerate redistribution of land to black South Africans.
I recently visited Russia with my family to explore possibilities of resettling in the area. I know that the growth in agricultural production is immense in Russia, so I think it's the right time to buy into agriculture in Russia, and I think there's a lot of potential. The reason I'm considering immigration is honestly because I see dark clouds hanging over our future. The reality is that we do fear for our lives. And the reality is that a white farmer is attacked every day in South Africa. My grandfather was murdered on this farm. The government is certainly responsible for creating a climate of antagonism towards white farmers.
We already have a plan for settlement of roughly 500 families with their own cattle near Stavropol.
See that they're actually now starting to move to Russia, and as I said to you in my earlier video, I think that's extraordinary because you've got to be really desperate to go to a communist country. But when you look what's happening in South Africa, I can understand if you've got no other options, but I believe there are other options, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So I'm going to just kick this off with what is happening in South Africa, and of course you guys all know this, but there are a lot of people who follow this channel who have no idea what's going on. So let's just look at this for a very short period of time. Okay, there is a bit of violence in here. I'm just warning you. Okay.
The use of young people like Andrew Zondo in the armed struggle escalates, especially after the Kabwe conference. Another phenomenon that greatly escalates is the use of the so-called necklace as a method to kill people who are accused of collaborating with the enemy.
The necklace method to murder a person was, with any doubt, one of the most horrifying, cruel, savage and barbarous manner to murder a person.
If you are
Okay, and it is barbaric, and in fact it really reminds me of this classic this classic clip out of Lord of the Flies, where Piggy is being chased by other kids with the intention of trying to murder him, and he lands up at the feet of some soldiers. Let's have a look at that.
What are you guys doing?
Now, the same question could well be asked about the South African politicians, because they're destroying their own country. I mean, that's the bottom line. And you know, in South Africa now, there are options that whites can look at, and especially white farmers. This is not a game, and the adults in South Africa, regardless of colour, need a wake-up call. Apparently, Zimbabwe, because of starvation and massive unemployment that they're facing, and financial distress, is now reconsidering the situation about white farmers and land ownership. Now, this is one of the things we're going to be discussing tonight. I welcome your views on the side channel. Let's discuss this further after my presentation. And we'll just start off with this short clip, which is a fairly poignant look at the old southern Rhodesia. Here we go.
Here's the story of Rhodesia, a land both fair and great. On the 11th of November, an independent state. This was much against the wishes of certain governments, whose leaders tried to break us down and make us all repent. But we're all Rhodesians and we'll fight through thick and thin. We'll keep our land a free land, stop the enemy coming in. We'll keep them north of the Zambezi till that river's running dry. And this mighty land will prosper, for Rhodesians never die. They can send their men to murder, and they can shout their words of hate. But the cost of keeping this land free can never be too great. For our men and boys are fighting for the things that they hold dear. And this land and all its people will never disappear. 'Cause we're all religions and we'll fight through thick and thin. We'll keep our land, the free lands of the enemy coming in. We'll keep them north of the Zambezi till that river's running dry. And this mighty land will prosper, for religions never die. We'll preserve this little nation for our children's children too. Once you're a Rhodesian, no other land will do. We will stand tall in the sunshine with the truth upon our side. And if we have to go alone, we'll go alone with pride. 'Cause we're all Rhodesians and we'll fight through thick and thin. We'll keep our land, the free lands of the enemy coming in. We'll keep them north of the Zambezi till that river's running dry. And this mighty land will prosper, for Rhodesians never die.
Those were the days. I used to travel to southern Rhodesia and Salisbury and Bulawayo, when it was still independent. And the last time I was actually in Zimbabwe, which is now the new state, was in 2016. And I was actually at Victoria Falls, and I came across two ladies while on that train cruise, or not cruise, train dinner that stops off at the top of the bridge at Victoria Falls, and you're kind of in between Zambia and Zimbabwe. And it was really interesting talking to these ladies because they had lived in Zimbabwe and previously Rhodesia all their lives. And I asked them a question about a comparison between South Africa and Zimbabwe, and I got an extraordinary answer, which I'd like to play for you. And this is something I filmed actually on the bridge with the two ladies. Okay, let's go and hear this.
In many ways, I think Zimbabwe is safer than South Africa today.
Oh, much. Oh, 100%.
Because South Africa, you just got to be living in fortresses.
South Africa is not for me.
Yeah.
South Africa is violent.
Yeah.
It is. It's very violent.
Completely different.
And you feel like that as well.
Yeah, it's completely different people. Our people largely here are very
peaceful.
friendly,
Absolutely.
very friendly,
Yeah.
apolitical, really, in a lot of ways.
No, definitely.
But in South Africa, you can feel that hatred, and it's still there, very much so.
It really is. Yeah.
Here you don't get that.
So that's from the horse's mouth. Those two ladies have lived in Zimbabwe all their lives, and they're saying that Zimbabwe is a far safer place to be than South Africa, which I found quite extraordinary, but they should know. Now, many white farmers are also moving to Mozambique, and that's another option that people are seriously looking at. And there's an area called Chimoya where they're actually encouraging white farmers to settle in Mozambique, and we'll have a look at that clip now.
Kevin Gifford left Zimbabwe more than 10 years ago. He says he was forced to move after his farm was seized by armed youth when President Robert Mugabe began his so-called land reform program. It was a scheme that took land from white owners and gave it to black Zimbabweans. Gifford says starting from scratch in Mozambique wasn't easy, but he's doing well now.
From having nothing been produced here, we've got a farm of 460 hectares. And with that 460 hectares is we grow about 220, 250 hectares a year. We employ anywhere between 175 to 350 workers here at any one time.
Over the last 15 years, more than 200 white Zimbabwean farmers have moved to this part of Mozambique. They were attracted not only by the safety this country offered, but also cheap land leases and promises of bank loans. The farmers say they have been treated well so far.
I do feel welcome in Mozambique. I think Mozambique has been very good to us. It started with President Chissano inviting us to come and help develop his country, and I think the government have been very proactive on that. Of course, we've had our problems. Everybody does, but yeah, I'm comfortable here.
2 hours drive down the road is Bill Creswell's tomato farm. He too came to Mozambique with little.
We started initially very small, and we've grown. We now grow 12 hectares of horticulture. It doesn't sound much, but in terms of tonnage, it's quite big.
But it's not only the new farmers who are doing well. It seems the new wealth is trickling down to locals. In a region with high unemployment rate, these foreign-owned farms have given the local economy a much-needed boost. Hundreds of mainly young Mozambican men who had no jobs before now work on these farms. The farm workers know why their Zimbabwean employers are here. They say they want more of them to come.
What happened in Zimbabwe, if it happens here, it will be sad for us because he's helping us a lot. In this community, there's a lot of unemployment.
Back at his farm, Kevin says he would love to return to Zimbabwe one day. But for now, he has bigger concerns, like finding new markets for his produce. Hamza Mohammed, Al Jazeera, Chimoyo.
Okay, there you have a Zimbabwean farmer who's moved to Mozambique and is apparently doing very well. Mozambique has got some great farming land, but some farmers also moved to Zambia, which is another option for farmers to look at in South Africa. Farming land in Zambia is pretty amazing, so let's have a quick look at that.
Doug Stanley loves the smell of freshly turned earth. The sight of his harvest makes it all worth the hard work. Farming is in his blood. Now he's working in Zambia, having been driven off his farm in Zimbabwe by supporters of President Robert Mugabe 14 years ago.
I bought my farm after independence, and I got clearance from the government to say that they weren't interested in that land. And then, to be told to move along, it's quite a thing. You do all that development, and it was my home.
4,000 white farmers were forced off the land, damaging Zimbabwe's agriculture industry. Its main export crop, tobacco, has almost recovered, but the maize harvest, which has also been hit by years of drought, remains too low to feed the nation.
People are dying of starvation. There's no food. We now living in Zambia, and there's quite a few Zimbabwe farmers here in Zambia, and we're actually exporting food to Zimbabwe.
Zambia isn't the only country benefiting from the Zimbabwean farmers' expertise. Many are in South Africa, Botswana and Mozambique too.
Well, I know that some ministers on the farm, but we actually drove through Zimbabwe 5 years ago and drove onto the farm, and there was absolutely nothing happening on the farm.
It wasn't only the white farmers who were affected. Their workers also suffered. Paul remembers living in fear of Mugabe's supporters. On the farm he fled just before it was seized. He's also still hurt by what happened.
A country is not about white, black, colored, Indian. We are same. So like the government of Zimbabwe, what they did to say we are taking farms from white, they were totally wrong.
There are Zimbabweans who disagree. Many say they have benefited from the government's reforms. But they were devastating for those forced off the land they had invested time, money and so much more in.
Okay, so white farmers are moving to other countries like Zambia, and the state of Zimbabwe now is absolutely appalling. I mean, the people there are starving, they're totally impoverished, and it's as a direct result of what South Africa is looking at doing, i.e. expropriating land from people. And that is just a shocker. Now, look what happens when a white farmer this year returned back to his farm. He was actually offered it back, and you have to look no further than the welcome he gets from the farm labourers to see how the Africans in Zimbabwe really want the whites to come back and take over the farms again. Here we go.
Their support has been amazing, and all the way along they're always phoning us, when are you coming back, how are things going, so they haven't lost faith at all. We had to really keep the faith up and said, no, we're definitely coming back, and we stuck to it. Even before the change of government, we told them that, and the change of government, of course, was a godsend to us.
Now we are all happy because the community was gaining from Mr. Smart. So I would like to say congratulations to what actually has happened. I was very disappointed of how Mr. Smart was chugged off from this place.
Jobs. Yes. Yeah. 100%. 100%. People were missing that.
Yeah.
Yes. We are so happy about it.
Yes.
And I think you're going to fulfill what the people were missing.
As always.
Thank you.
As always. No, thank you very much.
I know my wife and my children are going to be ecstatic of what's happened today, that we be back, actually back in our home again. Words can't describe, but yeah, I'm happy to be back in my home. I know there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of theft that's happened, but I was expecting that anyway. But I just can't wait to get back in a day or two's time and start sweeping up and moving back in and to get the farm going again.
As you know, there are elections taking place in Zimbabwe tomorrow, that's Monday. the 30th of July, and it looks like ZANU-PF are going to get in again. They're talking about it being a rigged election, which is probably the case. But we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Now, how are white farmers actually getting land in Zimbabwe? They're actually now getting it through a 99-year lease, and which is different to land ownership, but it's quite common in a lot of countries. In Fiji, for example, land ownership, that's the Fiji Islands, land ownership is by way of 99-year lease, and it works exceptionally well. You know, the people build hotels, and they have ownership of the land basically for their lifetime. But let's have a look at this clip about how land ownership in Zimbabwe is going to happen in the future. And
so we see there from what Patrick told us that economic mismanagement has been a big contributing factor, as it was in Zimbabwe, which also suffered from years of hyperinflation. And now, 15 years after it embarked on a sometimes violent land reform program, Zimbabwe's government is issuing leases to white commercial farmers. The theory is it'll help address food shortages and revive the flatlining economy. Haru Mutasa has more from Masvingo, south of the capital, Harare.
We need lots of eggs.
Helen Mitchell has been farming in Zimbabwe for decades. She's one of the few hundred white farmers left. She's constantly worried
Lay some eggs.
that she'll be kicked off the farm.
It's like living on a knife edge because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow or next week. If you want to go further forward with your projects, then you actually don't know that you're going to achieve what you want to do, and if you're still going to be there to reap the rewards.
But she could soon have some form of security. The government now says it will issue 99-year leases to whites who are providing a service to the community and working well with the locals. This is the only commercially run hatchery in Masvingo province, selling around 100,000 chicks a week. Before land reform, when many farms were seized from whites and given to black Zimbabweans, there were around 4,000 white commercial farmers. The Commercial Farmers Union says there are about 400 white farmers in Zimbabwe, but some aren't farming all of their original land. Much of it was seized during land reform. But some farmers say issuing leases won't revive the stagnant agricultural sector.
The land has been given to senior beneficiaries, politicians, people in the civil servants and all that. They work during the week there. At weekends they go back to their farms. They're not producing anything there, yet we are faced with starvation. There's a lot of land lying derelict. There's multiple farm ownership that needs to be sorted out. There's agricultural facilities, irrigation facilities that are not functioning at this stage. All this is part and parcel of the land reform program, which needs to be addressed.
Land ownership is a sensitive issue that causes racial tensions. Most new black farmers who benefited from land reform also don't have leases. Zimbabwe used to be called the breadbasket of Africa. The government hopes better security of tenure for black and white farmers could help the economy grow again.
Okay, there you have the future in Zimbabwe, apparently. 99-year leases on farmland. And this is another clip about Zimbabwe and white farmers actually returning to Zimbabwe.
Also in Africa, Zimbabwe has announced plans to return some farms to their former white owners. Now, this comes 15 years after the government sanctioned widespread land grabs that plunged Zimbabwe into economic chaos. But many say the announcement is as confusing as it is exciting. CCTV's Farah Mukatiyu reports.
It's been a decade and a half since hundreds of thousands of landless blacks moved onto vast white-owned farms. Questions have surrounded Zimbabwe's land reform program since day one, from how the land was acquired, whom it was given to, and how productive they've been. Clearly, there's no letting up on those questions as more of them arise, this time questioning what role white farmers will have going forward. According to state media, farms deemed to be of strategic economic importance will be allowed to remain in the hands of white farmers. Output of major crops, save for tobacco, are below par, leaving what was once Africa's breadbasket a net importer of food. That could be why some former landowners are being re-engaged.
If you're running a capitalist economy, you obviously want to be able to grow your crops at rates which will give you a huge profit on the international market. And you also want to be able to feed your people, because once you have a food problem in your own country, that ties your hands. You can't make much of policy of anything. This is a way of being pragmatic in a capitalist economy.
So,
my name is Anderson Pierre White.
So there you have it. Zimbabwe is open for business for white farmers, and clearly for whites who are looking for an alternative to South Africa if they fear for their lives. You know, the one regressive country in the world today is South Africa, with the way it's going with land. Even Cuba, which is a communist country, they are now privatizing land. Yeah, you heard that right. Cuba is privatizing land because they realize they have to get the economy going. And here's a short clip on that.
Nuris Higueras Martinez owns a restaurant that caters to tourists, diplomats, and affluent Cubans. She employs 22 workers, but up until now, Cuban law hasn't allowed her to incorporate her restaurant as a separate legal entity. Officially, at least, she's a businesswoman without a business.
If we could register the company, it would allow us to trade with other businesses in Cuba and abroad. It would allow us to import, and this could help us grow. That would not only mean growth for us, but growth for the economy, more employment, more people with their own businesses. That would be fabulous.
On Sunday, Cuba's National Assembly voted through a new constitution which recognizes private property for the first time in decades. The constitution will be put to a popular referendum later this year. The preamble of Cuba's constitution pays tribute to Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. But over the last decade, the private sector has grown and more multinationals have invested in the island. The new constitution's recognition of private property brings Cuban law into line with this new reality. Economist Emily Morris says there'll now be a constitutional basis for the island's private sector.
Ideologically, it's a shift because it's the Cuban system is supposed to be dominated by the state's supposed to run the economy. As I understand it, the intention is to limit the size of the private sector to small and medium-sized companies. The most fundamental principle of capitalism is the assumption of the freedom to do any kind of business activity unless it's prohibited. Whereas here, the assumption is that there's a certain kind of society they're trying to build, and that business activity is permitted as long as it's consistent with those principles.
Cubans yearn for economic...
Okay, so you can see that Cuba, a communist country, is privatizing land because that's the way it wants to get its economy going. Now, what are the options for whites wanting to leave South Africa? And Super, it's good to see you here on the side channel, and congrats on your success there. Yeah, we'll talk about Visa 187 on skills shortage shortly. I might be able to give you some advice on that. But first of all, what are the options for whites wanting to leave South Africa now? There are really not many. One is to stay and fight. Because I do believe that country is moving towards civil war when the Africans start just taking over land. There is Zeitlanders, but I don't think that's the way to go, quite honestly. I understand what they're trying to do. If you can move to Australia and New Zealand, that's a great option to look at. If you can't move to Australia or New Zealand, look at Canada. Just get a one-way ticket, because they have an open borders policy. And, you know, you can arrive there and just make it home. Alternatively, you can move to Zimbabwe, which, as I showed a bit earlier, is now encouraging white farmers and whites in general to come back and get their economy going again, now that Mugabe's totally screwed it up. You know, Zimbabwe's got huge issues with hunger and economic disaster. So, you know, they've got to look at other options, and I don't see how South Africa's going to follow a different path when they start expropriating the land. I mean, it's basically Zimbabwe 2.0. And, of course, the last option, which we started with, is for farmers to consider moving to Russia, which is extreme, but apparently a lot of people are considering that. Just on the issue of multiculturalism, and there have been a few people who've mentioned this in comments to my videos, regarding its impact in Australia, let me put the record straight. Australia is taking a very hard line on the loony left, and the immigration process here is very stringent. We do not have open borders, and they are certainly on top of, you know, issues related to multiculturalism. I'm going to close off the presentation today with an audio clip from Radio 702, where your famous Johannesburg, your famous Johannesburg radio station, where they're actually talking about where millionaires are moving to in the world when they're leaving their country, and it's a very interesting clip. Here we go.
Oh, the online report with Barbara Friedman, our online guru at Prime Media Broadcasting. She knows everything about online, all the numbers, you name it, what's been trending, what's not, who's hot, who's not. Good morning.
Morning, Kino.
So, we start off with a big question. To which country have most millionaires immigrated over the past couple of years? I've not seen this story, so can I take a guess?
Yes.
Mauritius.
No. The answer is Australia.
Why?
Of course.
Tell us more.
Yes. So for the third straight year, Australia remains the top country worldwide for millionaire inflows, beating traditional destinations like America and the UK. And this past year alone, 7,260 millionaires have surged into Australia, according to a New World Wealth 2018's Global Migration Review. But now the interesting thing is that South Africa shares a little chunk of that. Well, that's not really a big surprise, is it? But over 80% of their millionaires come from China, funnily enough, followed by Hong Kong, Malaysia, South Africa, and then Vietnam, with just over 1.3% being South Africans. That's about 95 of our richest citizens who've gone and immigrated down under over the past year.
You know, if you didn't distract yourself with corruption and all the other goings on and land debates in South Africa, then, and if I were a multimillionaire, I'd probably locate to South Africa as well because of how far my dollars go. I would imagine that we are talking about dollar millionaires here.
Yeah. Look, what's interesting is that the total wealth held in Australia has risen over these past 10 years by 83% compared to the US's 20%. It's just, when I read the story, I just was quite intrigued about how this country is just growing in wealth because all these millionaires are streaming in there.
Well, according to that report as well, Melbourne and Sydney were amongst the top 10 cities around the world to have the net immigration of millionaires. And also, Auckland, New Zealand didn't do pretty badly either, although we know that Auckland, New Zealand's not anywhere. Well, it's close to Australia, but it's not Australia, right? You were talking about Australia. And it'd be interesting to find out the why. What it is about living in Australia when you're a dollar millionaire. It's probably the lifestyle and, the amenities at your disposal, which probably beats South Africa hands down. But maybe you listening to the show and you've got some great ideas as to why these millionaires are gaining. You can call us on 021 446.
Okay, that's the audio clip from 702. And, we are very, very lucky in Australia. We have very few issues, very few problems. As I showed in that video clip last week with my hobby farm visit, even the farms, they don't need fences around the houses, and they've got the most of the houses in Queensland are what they call Queenslanders. They're basically timber homes. Hell of easy to break into them, but you don't have to lock your door if you're on a farm. You know, crime it does happen. Everywhere in the world crime happens, but it's very, very unusual. And when it does happen, the police normally catch the people who do it, and they have a very high retrieval rate on stolen goods here in Australia. Now, looking at the side channel. Okay, so Super, you've talked to an immigration agent in Cape Town. Now, I think you mentioned to me that your area of expertise is cyber crime, or you know, working in the software area. Is that correct? And look, anyone else who's watching, I see there are about 10 people watching right now. Please feel free to join in the side chat. Okay. Look, I have an idea which I think you should seriously look at or consider. The major banks are based in Melbourne. That's where their head offices are. I don't think you do. I don't think you do need years of experience, because we have a huge banking industry here, and what I would be doing is I'd be contacting the human resources sections of the big banks, and I'm talking about National Australia Bank, ANZ Bank, the Commonwealth Bank, and Westpac. But there are other banks like Bendigo Bank and Bank of Queensland and Suncorp, which are very big as well. And they all have problems with spam and phishing and all these things that happen on the internet. So if you contact those big banks in the human resources section and basically go through your skills and say, look, I want to learn, and I don't see why they wouldn't give you a serious consideration on that. Hi, Robert, how are you? Yeah, look, the problem I find with Europe is that it's becoming a Muslim country. I mean, you know, the whole Eurozone, they reckon by 2050, there are going to be more Muslims than there are going to be Europeans in that whole area. So it's going like hell in a basket case, quite honestly. Australia has got a very stable population, and it's got a huge amount of room. So I don't know if you're in farming or what you do. What sort of occupation do you have, Robert? You're very welcome, Super. I mean, I can tell you now, the banks here are huge, and they need all the skills they can get. An electrician, okay. Okay. Let me think about that. Look, I have a friend who works for a very large construction company, and I know they've got an electrical arm. You know, they've got electricians working for them. I can put a few feelers out for you and see if they're looking for electricians. The skills shortage here is huge. The country is growing so fast. So that's probably the only thing I can offer you at the moment, is actually making some inquiries about what the state of play is for electricians, because if they're seeking them, I mean, it's basically the same stuff. You don't have to go and study again like you do. If you're a doctor, for example, you actually have to go through a whole new regime if you're a South African doctor, and you have to go and study and to become a qualified Australian doctor. I don't think the same thing applies to electricians. Now, I don't want you giving me your email address on here, but what I suggest is, yeah, okay. Look, I'll be on here next week, or actually, what I might do is I might just do a little video clip and give you a bit of an update on the information I get from this large construction company. That's probably the best I can do at this stage, because they'll know what the trade is like. Okay. Now, is there anyone else here who wants to ask a question, or I can help? Please just say so. Alrighty. I hope you guys are having a good evening, and I'm here to help you guys. I've been through this myself, and as I've said before, yeah, Russia can be a solution, but my God, it gets cold there. Australia is far more like South Africa weather-wise. But yeah. Hi, Angel. Yeah, look, I think Trump has got a huge number of far more important issues than, you know, the farmers in South Africa or the whites in South Africa. But that's a good plan, you know, so contact them. I don't know much about America, so I really can't help you there. Are you and your family looking at moving out of South Africa, are you? By the way, I think Trump's a great guy. I think he's doing an amazing job in America. He's really turned their economy around. It's just such a shame that it's so conflicted between, you know, the Democrat areas and the Republican areas, and you know, San Francisco and California in general is just a basket case now. I mean, they're in real deep water, and there is so much disruption there by people like Antifa. You know, it's quite sad. Oh, cool. So you're actually an American contact. That's fantastic. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope you follow my my live stream videos, Angel, because we have them every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. So basically, this time next Sunday we'll be having another live stream. Do you have any advice for those who are watching the live stream right now? You know, those South Africans who are wanting to move to America? Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Multiculturalism does not work. No. No, it's crazy philosophy, and it's all been pushed by George Soros, who's a multi-billionaire in America, through his Open Societies organization, who are funding all these radical groups. Well, that's good news that South Africans who are looking at going to America have a voice in New York. I'll let you be in New York in a couple of weeks. I'm going over there. Not for long, just for a couple of weeks, but it's a break. Okay, Roger. Look, Robert, I'll get back to you in the next few days through a video about the state of play for electricians here in Australia. I'll have a word with the guys. And if there is a positive thing out of that, what I'll do is I'll give you some contact details, and you can contact them direct. And good luck, Super, with your contact with the banks. I really think you've got a really good chance with the skill shortage side. And Angel, good to speak to you. I'm going to sign out of here now, and I hope you guys are having a great evening, and our thoughts are with you. And chat soon.